In a turn of events so quiet that it almost escaped the notice of the outside world, yet so profound that it reshaped the monarchy from its core. The British royal family entered a new era without trumpets, without parades, and without warning. Behind the high stone walls of Buckingham Palace, where tradition usually moves at the pace of centuries, something unprecedented unfolded. Queen Camilla, once crowned, once central, once visible beside the king, was stripped of her royal title at the very moment King Charles handed the throne to Prince William. It did not happen before roaring crowds or under flashing lights. It happened in stillness, in private rooms, in hushed voices, and in decisions made not for spectacle, but for survival. Power shifted not with force, but with intention. The monarchy did not crumble, it recalibrated. And as one chapter closed, another opened with unexpected clarity, unity, and a farewell no one thought would come so soon. Inside the palace, the atmosphere that day was unlike any other. There was no ceremony rehearsed for the cameras, no carefully staged procession through gilded halls. Instead, there was a gathering marked by restraint and gravity. King Charles, composed and deliberate, stood before his son not as a ruler clinging to authority, but as a father who had reached a decision long contemplated. The crown, a symbol that had defined his life and lineage, rested nearby, waiting not to be claimed, but to be passed on. Camilla stood to the side, noticeably without regalia, without the presence that once defined her role. Her position was unmistakable. She was no longer at the center of power. She was an observer to history, not a participant in its next act. Those present sensed immediately that this was not a performance. This was not tradition playing out its familiar script. This was urgency shaped by reflection. King Charles did not speak at length. There were no declarations meant for record books. Instead, there was a pause, a silence so dense it seemed to press against the walls. And then, with a slow certainty, he turned to Prince William and did what no one had anticipated so soon. He surrendered the crown, not under pressure, not through scandal, not through public demand, but through choice. It was a moment that redefined what power looked like in the modern monarchy. Not dominance, but discernment, not holding on, but knowing when to let go. Prince William did not step forward eagerly. He did not reach for the symbol of authority as if it were a prize. He moved with the weight of understanding, aware that what was being handed to him was not just a throne, but a responsibility shaped by centuries of expectation and years of preparation. His eyes met his father's, and in that glance was gratitude, gravity, and resolve. The embrace that followed was brief, but it carried more meaning than any formal proclamation ever could. It marked the end of one reign and the beginning of another, bound not by ceremony, but by trust. As this unfolded, Camilla remained silent. Her expression revealed neither protest nor surprise, only acceptance. She had known. Long before that moment, conversations had taken place away from public ears. Decisions had been weighed. Outcomes had been understood, and when the time came, there was no resistance. Her role had changed, and with it, her place in the monarchy. She was no longer queen. Within hours, Buckingham Palace issued a statement so understated it shocked the world. Effective immediately, Camilla would no longer serve in the role of queen. Her new designation, Queen Consort Emerita, was ceremonial, symbolic, and deliberately distant from power. It carried courtesy without authority, respect without influence. The transition was swift and precise. During the handover, Camilla wore no crown, no jewels that marked status, no visible sign of rank. Afterward, her name disappeared from official releases. Engagements once scheduled under her name were quietly cancelled. Her staff were informed with dignity but finality. Offices were closed, calendars cleared. It was not a purge, it was a conclusion. Executed without scandal, without spectacle, and without negotiation. Inside the palace, there were no emotional scenes, no dramatic confrontations, just the understanding that her era had ended. Privately in her chamber, the final symbol of her reign was removed. The crown that once sat heavy with history was taken away without words, no witnesses, no announcements. Just the quiet removal of an identity she had spent decades stepping into. It was a moment that marked not humiliation, but transition. The monarchy was moving forward, and it was doing so deliberately. Before all of this, King Charles had one final conversation, and it was not with advisors, officials, or ministers. It was with Camilla. Alone, away from the weight of titles, he spoke simply, "It's time." There was no argument to make, no defense to offer. He did not ask for permission, and he did not apologize. He explained his choice not as an abdication born of weakness, but as a decision rooted in clarity. Insiders say Camilla listened, her emotions restrained, her understanding evident. When she responded, it was with a quiet acknowledgement, "I understand." That exchange, more than any official act, sealed the course of events. There had been whispers for months. About Charles's health, about fatigue, about a desire to see William lead while strength and stability remained. But in that final moment, the choice was not strategic, it was personal. Charles wanted peace for the institution he had waited a lifetime to lead. He wanted to ensure continuity without chaos. His final act as king was not ceremonial, it was paternal. A father stepping aside so his son could step fully into his future, and in doing so, he altered the narrative of monarchy itself. He did not fall from power, he walked away from it. When the moment came for William to take the throne, the room seemed to exhale. He approached not as a conqueror, but as a custodian. His acceptance of the crown was marked by restraint. There was no applause, no announcement, just a collective recognition that something fundamental had shifted. Catherine stood nearby, her presence steady, her expression calm. She did not need to be introduced or elevated in that moment. Her role was already understood. Together, they embodied a future that felt grounded, prepared, and human. While William took his first steps as king, Camilla took her last as queen. She did not linger, she did not address the press. She offered a small curtsy, a gesture filled with meaning, and then she withdrew. There were no photographers following her exit, no aides flanking her path. She left the public stage quietly, her departure echoing the way she had entered royal life years earlier, under scrutiny, under controversy, but with resolve. This time, however, there was no fight left to wage. Her chapter had closed. After the ceremony, when the cameras had moved on and the palace returned to its guarded calm, an unexpected moment occurred. Prince William sought out Camilla, not for protocol, not for obligation, but for closure. In a quiet hallway, away from eyes and ears, they spoke. What was said was never recorded, but those who witnessed the interaction described it as healing. William offered a brief, human embrace. Camilla responded with words spoken softly but heavy with meaning. "Take care of them." She was not speaking of herself. She meant Charles, the family, the institution. It was a moment stripped of titles and history, leaving only two people acknowledging a complicated past and a shared responsibility for what lay ahead. When they parted, there was no further exchange. It was a final bow, a final crossing of paths. Public reaction was immediate and intense. When Buckingham Palace confirmed the change in Camilla's status, social media ignited. Reactions poured in from every corner of the world. Some saw it as long-awaited justice. Others felt an unexpected wave of sympathy. Old wounds, old debates, old emotions resurfaced. Commentators struggled to keep up. Television networks interrupted programming. Analysts scrambled for context. The narrative of the monarchy had shifted overnight, and no one had predicted it would happen this way or this soon. Through it all, Camilla retreated. That evening, she returned to her private quarters without entourage or ceremony. She reportedly told Charles quietly that it had been an honor, even when it was hard. The jewels that once defined her public image were packed away, not hers anymore, not symbolically, not officially. Staff noted her composure. No tears, no demands, just acceptance. Her private team was dissolved. schedules erased, invitations redirected. It was a vanishing act executed with finality. Charles, too, stepped into the shadows. His transition was just as understated. No farewell address, no grand exit. His new role, advisor emeritus, reflected his intention, close enough to guide if asked, distant enough to allow space. He would no longer attend state functions unless invited. His seal retired, his voice quieted in official matters. It was not an end marked by defeat, but by wisdom. He had watched William grow into leadership, and he knew the danger of overstaying. He chose legacy over longevity. In the midst of all this, Catherine emerged as the monarchy's emotional anchor. Her actions spoke volumes. At a state dinner following the transition, she was seen guiding Camilla to her seat with warmth and respect. The gesture resonated far beyond the room. It signaled a future defined not by rivalry, but by empathy. Catherine did not seize power, she embodied it quietly. Within palace walls, her influence was acknowledged openly. She was no longer just beside the king. She was central to the monarchy's tone and direction. The restructuring of royal households began immediately. Camilla's offices were dismantled. Staff reassigned or released. Charities redirected. Clarence House transformed overnight. Portraits removed. Crests replaced. Media teams reshuffled. Younger voices elevated. Even uniforms subtly updated. The monarchy was not just changing leadership, it was rebranding its purpose. Days later, King William addressed the nation, without pomp, without grandeur. He spoke simply, directly, and with sincerity. He honored his father's decision to step aside with grace. He acknowledged Camilla's years of loyalty without embellishment. And then he spoke of unity, service, and love. His words carried weight not because they promised revolution, but because they promised connection. He spoke as a son, a husband, a father. He vowed to listen, to serve, to carry the crown with humility. And in that moment, something rare happened. The monarchy felt close. As the dust settled, it became clear that this was not about stripping a title or transferring a crown. It was about evolution. Camilla exited without scandal. Charles stepped back without bitterness. William rose without arrogance. Catherine stood without ambition. The crown did not lose meaning, it gained new context. A queen without a title, a king without a throne, a future rewriting the past. And as the palace doors closed on one chapter and opened to another, the monarchy proved that even the oldest institutions can change, not with noise, but with purpose.